Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out a pair from a brand we've looked at in the past. This is from MMI, and this is their latest, the Nor-Light. The Nor-Light is short for Northern Lights, and the significance will be very apparent as we go throughout. This one, as of time of publishing, is actually live on Kickstarter. I'll of course have a link down the video description. This is going to start at only around $325. That's actually past the super early bird, which was closer to $300, but I'm a little bit late to publishing here due to some shipping pieces. That being said, I do want to mention up front, in case you saw that banner, they do intend to send me a production version, but these are two of the three variants that are available, and we'll talk about the third as we go through. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive straight into these. First, we'll take a look at the packaging. These ship in a basic cardboard box. On the outside, you have a slip cover that does have a logo there with a nice mirror finish. On the inside, you have the actual cardboard box, and that is a mirror of the exterior. Popping that open, inside we have a PU leather watch roll, so this is a synthetic leather. Opening that up, you have 3 slots as well as their logo again embossed into that. Pulling this open, you can see here, these are actually 2 of the stretch goals. There are numerous stretch goals, all of which have been unlocked. So you have this leather strap, you additionally have this nylon NATO style strap, and then there's a rubber strap that we don't have. And then additionally, there is a warranty card as well, plastic construction there. So overall, you're getting a pretty equipped package. Alright, now that we have a better feel for how these ship, let's look at these watches and we'll set them aside and do them one by one here. The specs are going to be the same. They're both going to come standard with a 1-year warranty. You know, it's always like to see at least 2 years. However, this has reliable movements and everything in it, so I expect that it'll be plenty reliable. As far as the basic dimensions, from the roughly 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, this is coming in at 39.3 millimeters. That does continue with the bezel. As you can see here, it is flush to the case. The lugs are going to be a strap-friendly 20 millimeters. The lug-to-lug is a pretty versatile 46.5 millimeters. I think pretty well in keeping with the overall size. The thickness on my calipers is coming in at 11.9 millimeters, and that is including this crystal, which the crystal itself, they have listed as being a single dome crystal. However, if you look at it, to me, it presents more like a double dome. You don't get a lot of that distortive effect, and we'll switch it up and look at them here. As you can see, as you go to the off axis, it stays pretty crystal clear. So to me, I would keep it more in mind of like a double dome for it. But this is a sapphire crystal, and it does feature an inner AR coating. As far as the movement, depending on which variant you get, it is stated as coming with either the Miyota 9015 on the date version or the 9039 on the no date versions, and there are 2 different no date options. On this particular one, I think it's just because it's a prototype. This seems to be a 9015, even though it says 9039 on the back, because there is a ghost position. But on a 9039, which is essentially the same movement but without the date, would not have a ghost position there. Both of those, in case you're not familiar with the 9 series, they're excellent movements. They're going to be automatic. They do have hacking, hand winding. They're higher beat at 28,800 beats per hour and roughly 42-hour power reserve as well. As far as the water resistance, it's respectable for this overall styling. This is coming in at 100 meters or 10 atmospheres, which for the sports aesthetic of this isn't a dive watch. I think that's more than adequate, so that's great. As far as the weight, size to my 6.5-inch wrist, these are coming in at approximately 133 grams. I got 132.5 on this version and 133.5 on the other one that we'll talk about here momentarily. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually dive deeper into these and look at what's different with these, because it's more than just meets the eye. There's actually 3 variants of dial that are available, so really it's one namesake. However, there's 3, in my opinion, independent models. There's the tinted version, which that is going to be this reddish orange that we're looking at. They call it an orange dial, however, it does present as more of a red. It's also available though in a black, a blue, a brown, as well as a purple. And those are stretch goals, however, they have already been met. Those are all going to be a sapphire that is a tinted sapphire. The other version that we have here is actually a Washi paper dial. So that is layers of extremely thin paper. I believe it's something like 1/10 the thickness of computer paper. So very, very thin, but they have multiple layers of that. And it gets a really neat effect that we'll look at. That's going to be available in the blue we're looking at, but also a white and an orange variant. And then there's a third version, which is really slick as well. That's going to feature an actual like Lume pattern on it, and that's the Northern Lights. And that's available in a black, a white, as well as a blue. All of these are going to stay true to having sapphire dials. So that is a common thread through each of these. It's what is behind it that really mixes things up. As you can see on the tinted version, that is going to be a skeletonized style. So you're going to be able to see straight through that to the movement, and that's actually how it highlights the date complication that we'll talk about here momentarily. But then additionally, you have the paper backing on the Washi version, and then you have on the other variant, you're going to have that Lume effect that brings out that Northern Lights right to the face that we'll also see present on the case back. All of these are going to have commonality as far as the printing for the logo at the 12 o'clock position, as well as automatic at the 6 o'clock position. Additionally, they're going to have hashes, so you have nice precision legibility. It does have distinct for the 5-minute markers, as well as individual hashes for the minutes and seconds. Additionally, you're going to have your alternating numerals, consistent with like an aviation or a field style watch. So you have your 12-2 for all your odd numbers all the way around, and then you have triangles in between those. So that's a nice consistent layout there. Each of these additionally are going to be retained with 4 screws. You'll see them at the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position, and that's what keeps that sapphire overlay in place. As far as the date versus no date, the date version of this is only going to be the tinted version, and that's because it uses the signature of the MMI, which is that turret type design. And we'll look at another one that features that here, one of their other models we've looked at in the past with the Sky Hunter a little later on in the video. The other versions are going to be, again, no dates. As far as the hardware, that is going to be consistent across each of these variants as well. They're what I would describe as being a Dauphine style, a traditional Dauphine style handset. So your hour and minute are going to be highly polished. They do have that Dauphine crease. As far as the Lume application, it's broken with just a straight line that's kind of like reminiscent of a cathedral kind of cut in there, but it's not real fanciful like a lot of the cathedrals are. The second hand is also going to be polished, has a nice flare out like an arrow style for the counterbalance, and then you do have an arrow tip on that. As far as the Lume application, the Lume is going to vary depending on which version you get. As you can see here, you can clearly notice that the right version is the date variant, and then the left is going to be the Washi paper version. One of the things I noticed is the hands definitely perform well, and those are X1 BGW9 for most of the lineup. However, the printing, I noticed, and this could just be a limitation on the prototype, but the printing does seem to be much more pronounced as far as the Lume glow on the Sapphire dial, or I should say the tinted dial version, the date version, than it does on the Washi version. So I'm not sure if that'll make it through into production or not, but it does definitely perform better. Additionally, you'll notice the date itself is actually lumed. Certainly that's, to me, more of a somewhat novelty accent for it. You can tell in initial legibility that it is there. However, I think that's more of just a feature. Additionally, this does have Lume applied to the crowns, and then we'll look at actually the case back has Lume as well when we check that out here momentarily. As far as the bezels, the bezel on this is going to be a fixed construction. As you can see, and as we already looked at, it is flush to the case. It has a nice steep slope to that bridges between the case side as well as the crystal. It is consistent with the rest of the watch, going to be very heavily polished, so it is full polish on all surfaces all the way around. As far as the case itself, I would describe this as being somewhat of like a slab type construction. It does have crease cut-ins for the lugs themselves, but otherwise it's just a pretty straight vertical cut all the way around. A rather basic case overall. Additionally, as we already talked about, it is full polish everywhere, so you're going to see a lot of polish as a running theme as we go through this. It does have downturned lugs, and as you can see, they sit pretty well flush with the case back, so that's a nice choice there in my opinion. As far as the crown, or rather the lugs, you can see that this does have chamfer cut to break that up just a little bit for that transition. Shifting over to the top here, you can see you do have a little bit of a brushing accent to kind of break things up from the face, and I think that more nicely transitions with the bezel. On the crown side, you can see that there is no integrated crown guard, which again, I think is in keeping with the overall aesthetic of this sport type watch. As far as the crown itself, the crown is coming in at 5.3 millimeters, definitely on the smaller side. It is a push-pull type construction, which again, with 100 meters of water resistance, plenty respectable, and it's nice and easy to grab a hold of. As far as the finish on this, it is going to be heavily polished, as you can see there. Additionally, it does have a coin edge. And then, as you can note here, and as we already saw, this does have not only the signature, but that is lumed as well. The access on this is a little bit limited, and we'll talk about this more, but it does have a slight cut in. It's a little bit hard between the smaller size and getting underneath there. It's a little bit hard to grab a hold of, so that's definitely not ideal, and that's one of the limitations of the slab side that we'll also talk about further. Shifting over to the case back. The case back on this, all of these are going to be a screw-in construction, so actually screw in for the case back, not held with screws. All of them are going to be consistent in that they too are polished. Additionally, they do have milled text going all the way around the perimeter. Then you have your exhibition window, but this is what sets them apart, is they're going to vary depending on which version you get. As we can see here, we have the version that's going to be like the tinted, so the date version, as well as the other version that we don't have here that will have the Northern Lights kind of patterning and layout. Then additionally, there is the washi that has its unique accent for that as well. So that's a really cool touch, and as you can see, this is actually loomed as well. So that's a pretty cool, yes, it's a novelty piece, however, that's something that I like for overall for something different. As far as the bracelet on this is going to be tapered from 20 millimeters at the lugs down to 18 millimeters at the clasp. At the lugs, it does have female end links, so you get nice articulation there that we'll look at further as we go through. The construction is going to be what I would call like a 5-link kind of construction. It's a little bit reminiscent of like a Beads of Rice or a Jubilee, but a more industrial look in wider, broader 5 links. But the reason I make that comparison is it does actually have individual articulation to the links that we'll see here momentarily. It is going to be a combination of brushing on the outside as well as polishing for the inner 3 links. It is retained with screws, so nice easy changes there. And if you don't already have one, I do encourage you to grab a quality screwdriver. I'll have an inexpensive one linked down in the video description. Definitely pick one of those up, they're good to have on hand. As we already talked about, the articulation on this I think is pretty solid. The tolerance is a little bit tight in between the links, but I find that it still moves pretty freely, and with having the individual articulation to the center links, much like a Beads of Rice, it does drape over the wrist pretty well. As far as the clasp here, I do want to have a footnote for this because there is actually potentially going to be a change up, and we'll talk about that further. But this, as it presently sits, is going to be a basic fold over construction. So as you can see here, it is signed, it has that basic fold over, then it has a double pusher. You push the double pusher and you have a milled bridge on the inside. On the exterior, you have 5 micro adjust holes, and you do have a brushed finish going throughout that. But on the actual Kickstarter, if they get to adequate funding, they actually do have a toolless. But again, we'll talk about that. So now that we have a better feel for the watch itself, let's go ahead and bring in a handful of different comps just to get a better feel for this. So first, I have another MMI here. You can see this is going to be more reminiscent, smaller scale, but more reminiscent of the date version. So you do have that turret here. This is the MMI Sky Hunter, which has a stated spec of 38 millimeters. So a hair smaller, and you can definitely see the difference in the dial as far as the overall layout and the size for that matter as a whole for the case as well. But you can see it does bring in and stay true with that turret type. I like the way that it's incorporated here with the Sapphire, with that kind of disc that just rotates around and you can see a little more bold. Here you just have that small orange accent and it goes around, but it's a similar idea and it's really become a signature for the brand. Next up, this is from Le Sablier, and this is their Chronosport. As you can see here, I wanted to bring this one in because this is more reminiscent to this, where you have another kind of tinted, this is actually acrylic here, whereas this is sapphire, but same kind of idea in construct there. This one is a stated spec of 41 millimeters, and you can definitely see the presence in the case. The dials themselves, I think, are relatively similar to each other, but that gives you a feel for another execution of a Skelly. And then finally, just bringing in for kind of the sweet spot in the middle here, this is a Zelos Mako. This is actually the Mako GMT. Just wanted to get another look at that malachite dial that we've looked at in the past. This is coming in at 40 millimeters and just gives you, again, an idea there. You know, the difference, of course, between a dive style, or GMT in this case, bezel versus a fixed bezel on this sports style watch. So you different sizing there. Alright, so now hopefully you have a much better feel for the watch, but I do want to give you some insights as to my personal view of the positives, critiques, as well as the overall summary. First, for the positives, I've got to say, the price on this to me is absolutely incredible. For what you're getting at around, you know, like I said, as of time of publishing, around $325 at launch, it was around $300, so slight bump there. But for having a Miyota 9 series movement, the overall, as far as the feature set of this, especially if we can get up to the Tolus Micro, but additionally, as we saw, coming with nylon strap or rubber strap, as well as the leather strap, you know, decent watch roll, all that kind of stuff, you're getting a heck of a lot for your money. So really solid there. Definitely, that's a huge plus. As far as the dial variety, you know, we've looked at 2 variants here with having a lot of variants between these 3 on this one 5, I believe, on this one, as well as having another 3 that are still available out there with a completely different dial. You've got a lot of choices that are available from colors as well as textures and overall style, depending on your preferences. So that's pretty sweet. And then additionally, I think each of these are unique. You know, from the tinted Sapphire, that's something you don't see all the time. The washi paper, I can't say that I've seen any of those. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but that's a really cool touch as well. And then that Nor-Light, you know, we've seen other Lume accents, but that's something, whether it's a novelty or not, it is a cool touch, and I like that. Comfort, I have found to be solid. You know, these I think fit pretty darn well on my 6.5-inch wrist, but additionally, though, they're size versatile. I do think this has plenty of presence when you look at it on my 6.5-inch wrist, but I think for larger wristed folks, especially with a fixed bezel, you're going to find, unless you have a very large wrist, this still has plenty of legibility and plenty of overall size and presence for it. For smaller wristed folks, as you can see, I've still got some wiggle room here. I don't think you can get a ton smaller than my 6.5-inch wrist to comfortably fit, but you should have a pretty good idea. This is pretty well in keeping with standard 39mm sizing for that. As far as some critiques though, you know, there are definitely some pieces that I would like to see changed. First is going to be, as we already talked about, the clasp. This clasp, as it is, on a $300 price point, I think it's plenty respectable. However, I'm a huge fan of tooless micro adjust clasp. I would love to see them get to that stretch goal. So that's something that I'm excited to see. That's actually a late addition here based on some early feedback from it. So I do hope they can get to that. So definitely drop onto their Kickstarter campaign, see if they're getting close, because I would love to see that get pushed over to the edge there. As far as the dial reflection, you know, one of the things that I asked them about is they do not have AR coating applied to the actual Sapphire dial itself. So the crystal does, but the dial does not. The reason for that being is their production company was concerned about the printing being able to stick. So they didn't know if that would possibly delaminate against that with having that AR coating, if that would have an impact there. They perhaps could have gone on the inside, but I don't know that that would have helped for it, since it would really be surface level reflection you're concerned with. The reason I bring this up is, as you can see here, with this tinted version on the red, I haven't actually noticed too much of an issue. I can always see straight through it. So I don't know if it's the color or the style or what. However, with this washi, you can see, especially with the color of that paper, you can really lose that paper effect. So I don't know if it's the dark matte backing or if it's the difference of the texture or what it is, but it does wash out a lot more. Legibility is still there, so it's not really a problem, but you lose some of the washi effect out there, or some of that paper effect out there in the sun, as we've seen at different angles and different times. So not a huge deal, but definitely something I wanted to note. Additionally, as we've seen, polish, you know, that's one of the things you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this much polish. I think they were way too gratuitous with the usage of that, especially with being all over the slab case side with a sporty type watch. I wish they would have just done some brushing there. It's a fingerprint magnet, as this amount of polish always is going to be. But then additionally, just overall aesthetic, I personally think it fits the sports aesthetic a little better, even if they kept the polished bezel and those kinds of things. I think they could have done a little more touches, but you've just got a lot of polish all over the place. That's going to be a preference-based piece. And then as far as the case, as we already talked about, it's a relatively basic case construction. I would love to have seen a little more curvature to that, a little more kind of bulge, or just giving it some character. Right now it seems a little bit generic for the case, but again, at a $300 price point, it's tough to complain too much there. And as we already talked about, that does have the impact on the ability to grab the crown. If it had a little more of a radius or something there, it would be easier to get a hold of. Not a big deal. You can get it, but that being said, it is definitely in the critique category. So where does that leave us overall? Despite those little pieces that I just mentioned, I don't think any of those to me are non-starters at all. I think for the price point, you're getting a well-finished watch. I think the dial options are going to be tough to beat, as well as the overall spec. So all that is to say, if you'd like any of these styles, if any of the colors speak to you, I think it's pretty hard to go wrong at around the $300 price point. So there you have it. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy it, please always do hit that like button. And if you haven't already done so, give that subscribe button a tap. Thanks for watching.